did he throw himself into the pond? Why did he jump in feet first into this very controversial subject where there is, as you said, very little evidence that stands still? See, the difference between what we do at Enterprise and what the UFO people do is that we have evidence that absolutely stands still.
I was just going to say that because sometimes, as wild as your evidence is, and as crazy as it may seem, at least you present data, pictures, events, things for us to look at, things for us to digest. You don't get that on the other end.
And I think part of that is by design. If folks are visiting us, and I think the evidence that I've seen tips me in that direction, then the officials in this government, other governments on this planet, have done their best, their damnedest, to make sure that the field is so confused, so muddied, so turgid, such a turnoff for people who like, clear answers, that only the most, long-lived diehards who really are kind of, looking at the skies for salvation from things that are going on around the planet now, like what's going on in the Middle East, that someone may come and save us from outer space. Only those people really cling to the extraordinarily complicated and completely disingenuous field called ufology. And I say over and over again, Enterprise does not do UFOs. And I say that very specifically because when I was in the museum field back in Springfield, which you cited in your intro to me a few minutes ago, I had the occasion to actually visit and spend an entire night with Betty and Barney Hill. And I was able to debrief them. I was able to actually suggest to Betty Hill, I think I told you this on the show a few months ago, that I'm the one that suggested to her, 19, a curator at this museum in Springfield, a few hundred miles away, I suggested that she draw, under hypnosis, the star map that she allegedly saw as part of her abduction.
Which was the most amazing part of that entire case.
Because it was reproducible, and my hope was that if we did it under controlled conditions with Benjamin Simon, who was a world-class psychologist in Boston that she and Barney had gone to because of these very disturbing dreams that they thought were just dreams, that we would have something that would stand still, that would be scientific evidence. Well, it turned out that Alan Hynek took my suggestion seriously, and he actually set it up so that Betty was hypnotized, and she drew, as best she could under hypnosis, an accurate map. And then others, people like Marjorie Fish, who was an astronomy student at Ohio State University, I think, got wind of it and was able to get access to the map and then created a 3D model which ultimately resolved to two stars called Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 as the probable location of the stars on the map that Betty drew, and that's where that all started from. And when I looked at this whole thing that I had started, I realized that there would never be an end because there was internal, external, and eternal controversies over the authenticity of the map, her viewpoints, how well she recollected, how many probabilities there were for other stars in different configurations to give you different answers. And I realized at this very tender age of 19 that if I was interested in extraterrestrial life, UFOs was the last thing that would ever give me an answer. So decades later, when I came across these official images from NASA of Cydonia and the face on Mars and all that's come subsequently to that, the difference is all that stands still. It's our own evidence. And even though NASA tries to claim that it's not real, it's in the archives. It has an official paper trail. And you can look on the website tonight, and you can see image by image by image how we have moved this ball forward. And there's some extraordinary stuff on those pictures.
We'll be back with Richard C. Hoagland in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. I'm looking at Richard C. Hoagland's EnterpriseMission.com website right now, and as I'm looking at some of those pictures that he's got posted, some fantastic pictures. Man, was I enthralled with the animation picture of the face on Mars. Just look at that side view. I mean, it is fantastic. It's really a great graphic. EnterpriseMission.com, that's what we're talking about with Richard C. Hoagland when we come back on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie with Richard C. Hoagland. Richard, I'm on the EnterpriseMission.com website. Kind of hold my hand a little bit.
Okay.
Not too tightly, though, Hoagland. And take me through this and some of the images that we're beginning to look at here.
Okay, well, people need to log on so they can share this experience with us. www.enterprisemission.com. That'll bring up our main page. You'll scroll down a little way down the main page past the Joshua Tree Conference banner, which we'll talk about later because it actually plays a role in our moon story tonight. And the second banner at the top of the page is called Missing Apollo 11 TV Examples. And you click on that, and that takes you to a special page we prepared, which basically has, maybe a dozen images, both Moon and Mars, because we're going to talk about Mars tonight too, which we've assembled from, to kind of help us tell our story. We're starting out with some comparisons of the kind of images that we would have seen in, television land if somehow in the last decade or two NASA had not inexplicably misplaced, with the help of the National Archive, almost 700 boxes of original video, Apollo 11 video and telemetry material.
This can't happen, Richard. They had to have been stolen.
This is just absolutely nuts. We've been able to trace this now back to 1984. If you look at the top of our special Apollo 11 TV page tonight, at the very top you'll see a link which says the official story of the search for the Apollo 11 tapes. That is a PDF file that was sent to us from Parkes, Australia, which is one of the downlink stations in 1969 that was a huge antenna that was relaying the signals from, Buzz and Neil on the moon to NASA and to satellite television and to the rest of the world through broadcast TV networks. It turns out that if you look at some of those first images that I've got up there, you'll see on the left it says things like Parkes antenna, and then on the right it says, or on the left it says broadcast, on the right it says Parkes or Honeysuckle Creek. Those are Polaroid snapshots taken of the monitors at these ground stations, literally halfway around the world, compared to what the scan converter was doing in semi-real time to convert this special TV format, because it wasn't in the national broadcast NTSC video format that people can receive on their home TV sets.
That's why it was so grainy?
So it had to be converted. That's why it was so grainy. Now, if you look at the main page of Enterprise, right there's two thumbnails, a left composite and a right composite. And if you look at the frame on the far left of the Apollo TV examples, you can see what we all saw, including us at CBS headquarters in New York with Walter. That was broadcast. That's what we saw with Neil coming down the ladder on the left-hand side. The frame just to the right of it is a Polaroid taken off the monitor at Honeysuckle Creek. Actually, it's a 35-millimeter photograph of the slow scan monitor, showing you an incredible difference in quality.
Oh, yeah.
And then if you go to the two images on the right of that thumbnail, the one on the left, dark one, is the one we all saw of Buzz. I think he was driving the surface sampler tube into the surface there, trying to get a soil sample, a so-called core tube. And the image on the right is what was photographed off the screen at Goldstone, which was another of the downlink stations in Southern California, receiving direct TV from the moon. But this was not the video. These were just stills that were caught either by accident or because someone was taking some pictures for press that night for media publicity. And the original 1-inch Ampex videotapes, which are of pristine quality, which could now be put through modern computer programs, digitized, where you could see the rivets on the lunar module. Since 1984, according to the people who have, basically been looking now, ex-NASA employees, people at Westinghouse, which were in charge of the, constructing the actual TV camera for that first mission, other people around the world at the Parkes antenna and at the Science Institute in Australia, all of these people looking since 1984 cannot find 700 boxes of Apollo 11 data, including these priceless videos, and that's like over 20 years.
Somebody's got them in their house.
They've either got them in their house or, and this is another theory we have to think seriously about, which is why we have further images further down that page, someone realized when computer technology got good enough, and these original tapes could be reconstituted and put out as DVDs or put out to the broadcast networks to show again, like reprising on an anniversary of Apollo 11.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there were things on that horizon that we were not supposed to see. To give you one example, at the very top of that page, the Apollo page we prepared, there is a mosaic of Apollo color lunar films that Buzz Aldrin shot, standing by
right, and it's got his signature up there on the top,
with his
right?
signature on the top.
All right.
That was made by somebody at the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal. I forget his name, but you go to the Apollo Science Journal site, and it's everybody's credited there. This was a mosaic put together of the Hasselblad color hard copy film that was shot. Look at that horizon.
It is so pristine, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely. But these are like 1/250th of a second images,
yes,
snapshots that were then put together on the ground as a mosaic in the computer decades after Buzz shot those pictures, because they were individual frames and they were put together as a panorama. The TV camera, if you go back and you look at the films or the kinescopes of that broadcast, you'll see that what they did is they had Buzz basically set up the TV camera and then turn it around the horizon in segments, moving it and then stopping, and then letting it sit there, and several seconds ran the
and
video.
And then just move it again.
Then move it again, just so they got a complete panorama of the landing site. Well, each of those frames, which were sent at, I think, 30 frames per second, each of those frames in the computer could be stacked. They could be added to each other, which drives down the noise and builds up the signal. It's kind of like taking a long time exposure. And what would we have seen on that horizon or over that horizon if those original scan Apollo 11 black and white tapes had been processed by modern 21st century computer technology, and is that why those boxes have disappeared? I mean, this is a national disgrace.
Oh, it is.
In
Absolutely.
fact,
they're hiding them for some reason.
I think they're hiding them based on what's in the photographs below. Now, if you go down below Buzz's panorama, which is film, you'll see I've got side-by-side comparisons of the broadcast version of the TV versus what was shot at the ground stations off the monitors.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that it's night and day.
Oh, yeah, it's huge.
You can see
Big
the
difference.
potential. I mean, this was a very high-end, state-of-the-art black and white camera that Westinghouse had developed to go to the moon for this first mission. Stan LeBar, who was a senior engineer at Westinghouse, he was 44 at the time, gave us all kind of primers in how the camera worked and what the lighting conditions were expected to be, and signal to noise and the bandwidth and all the technical stuff, which ultimately doesn't mean anything to anybody except an engineer. And we all fully expected someday that we would get to see much better versions of that landing, of that incredible historic footage of the events Buzz talked about, and someone has stolen our heritage.
I got to tell you, just looking at these images, looking at the LEM on the moon, you look at that and you go, how in the heck did that thing make it?
Now, another part of the story is that tonight we were going to run an experiment in Washington, D.C. We had a television station, TV 49,
Cable?
approach us.
Yeah.
And they are doing a kind of a simulcast in that they're running a crawl across their screens for everybody in D.C. who can hear my voice. If you tune in channel 49, UHF, remember UHF, George?
I sure do.
They're not even on cable yet. They're so new. But they have really taken fire on the story because they broadcast to the entire metropolitan area. They have a very 150,000-watt effective signal. They have their antenna 400 feet up on the NBC antenna on Cathedral Hill. They blanket the District of Columbia and 30 miles beyond the Beltway. All night long, as we're on the show here, they're running these pictures on television for people who listen to Coast who don't have computers, George. As you know, and I know, a lot of people who listen to us when we do this stuff with the Internet, they can't see it because they don't have computers.
That's true.
So for people in the metro area, tonight you can see all these pictures. They're running sequentially. They're looping them so that you'll see all the pictures with captions come by.
Over and over.
Over and over again. They're going to do it all night. And what they've done is they sent out a press release to all the major media in Washington today, to the Congress, to the White House, to NASA, telling the legislators, your and my representatives on Capitol Hill, that there is an amazing story coming off. Apparently NPR did a feature this morning on National Public Radio on this same missing Apollo tape story. So people can see in the comfort of their own home or their offices, even if they don't have the Internet, they can actually see what we're talking about. And I really want to compliment the station management and the ownership. And this is an experiment. They're also running a crawl across their screen for you folks in the D.C. area who see this to, call them or email them and give them some feedback of whether you'd like to see more of this, because they're planning, if this works, to do this with some other guests on Coast to Coast.
Well, that's not a bad idea, Richard.
It's a terrific idea because they have a captive audience. The only way, George, we're going to make a difference in this extraordinary, horrific tragedy of losing 700 boxes of heritage is if somebody can track them down and fess up and say, I've got them, I was told to take them, there's an agenda, they're in such and such a warehouse, they're in such and such a room at Goddard. This TV station is planning to send news crews tomorrow to both NASA headquarters to interview Michael Griffin on record, the new NASA administrator, as to what he's doing to find these tapes, as well as another crew out to Goddard to the one laboratory, George, which exists currently that can play the tapes, and they're planning to close it and eliminate the equipment in October of this year.
Now, these tapes, Richard, were they supposed to end up at Goddard? Is that where they were going?
They were supposed to end up at the National Archive. And apparently, according to the story, which is, again, linked to our Apollo page, to the PDF that was written by the astronomer at Parkes Observatory who's been spearheading the effort to find them, who was part of the original team that recorded them on magnetic tape in Australia for us and for, posterity.
Right.
He has been looking and looking since apparently 84. And he's written his whole story up. It's there on the web. It's linked both on our site. It's also linked on the TV49 site in D.C. if somebody who happens to have a computer, comes by the station. It's an amazing story because the trail ends when Goddard apparently asked the National Archive to send these 700 boxes of original NASA Apollo 11 data back to Goddard from the archive where they had been kept up until 1984, from 69 to 84. And these boxes leave and are signed out of the National Archive.
Okay, so they were there.
Yes.
Okay.
And they never arrived at Goddard. There is no written record
that
of
they showed
anybody who received them.
So who was the one carting them around?
The guy who did sign for them, who's now dead, has left no paper trail as to where they were stored.
Oh, my.
And, I'm hoping that this incredible audience, which, as you know, is the smartest audience in radio.
Yes, they are.
Know people who know people who know people who know someone who knows where these tapes are. And it's one of these things where if you send us an email and you say they're in such and such a locker or, that kind of thing, it's no blame, no shame here. All we want, all the people at NASA, all the Goddard guys, all the NBC people, CBS people, ABC people who were part of this whole incredible story back then, all we want is and I'm talking on behalf of all Americans, all our tapes back.
But we don't know where they are anymore.
But we don't know where they are. And so what we were hoping was that by simulcasting this program tonight on this incredibly innovative and pioneering TV station, TV49 there in D.C., that we could get some political clout and we could get some noise in the media, mainstream media like the Washington Post, the New York Times, CBS, NBC, Fox, CNN, whatever, to basically go and knock on Mike Griffin's door.
That's Freudian there, Richard.
Well, it's another discussion for later in the evening.
Yes.
Mike Griffin's door, who is now the NASA administrator, who is going to us and to the Congress with a perfectly straight face and asking for billions of dollars, George, to go back to the moon. Now, why would we give Michael the money to do that if they can't protect the information that we got the first time around?
That's crazy. I mean, what would you be doing right now, for example, if all the Viking pictures of Cydonia were just gone?
We'd be dead in the water.
Yeah.
We could never prove anything that we claimed was official, because the key now in the Internet age is that we post pictures. We have links to the original documents and examples of those images in the official NASA archive.
I think we crashed your site again, by the way.
That's why television is handy, because you can't crash TV.
Jeez.
So everybody in the D.C. area who's listening to us, did I understand correctly that WMAL is off the air tonight?
I don't know if they're doing transmitter work tonight or not. I got a couple fast blasts from some people who listen regularly to WMAL AM in D.C., and they said that they were hearing some sporadic static. So, and every once in a while, a station will do a little transmitter maintenance. So I don't know if it's tonight totally or just for an hour or two. I don't know. So if anybody's out there in Fast Blast land and you're listening to us on WMAL, my favorite station in Washington, D.C., just send me a little message and let me know if that transmitter maintenance has been taken care of.
Well, TV 49 has been doing promos all day for WMAL in our broadcast tonight.
Great.
Because the idea is to get a squeeze play going here. At the top of the Enterprise website, you will find an email link, which is Dr. Michael Griffin's formal NASA headquarters email address. If anybody out there is upset as I am, having worked on this, shoulder to shoulder with Walter Cronkite, and find it unconscionable that we can lose this priceless heritage. You only land on the moon for the first time once, right? And the idea that we can't ever see the real quality of those images and maybe some interesting things that those cameras recorded, because someone either deliberately stole these boxes or put them in some black vault somewhere because they don't think we should ever see them, or just ripped them off because they want to make a buck on eBay.
Yeah, or sold them to some collector, some rich collector.
Some private collector. I mean, there's a great Star Trek where they steal data and put him in this room with all these other one-of-a-kind things. Can you imagine if there is some guy, some multi-billionaire somewhere who is showing through his computer technology the original landing tapes from Apollo 11?
And he owns them.
And he's got them, and he brings in certain of his cronies, and they sit there, and they ooh and they ah, and he knows that they're the only ones that exist on the entire... I mean, this is an outrage.
And let me correct that. He doesn't own them. We do.
We own them, and he's just stolen them.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there's several possible scenarios. It's almost irrelevant which scenario is right. The fact is, these boxes, 698 out of 700, are missing.
It should be an FBI investigation.
There absolutely should. And so Channel 49 is tomorrow morning going to ask Mike Griffin on camera, what are you doing to find them? And what I am doing with this audience is saying that somewhere out there tonight, someone, George, knows more about this than we know now.
No question about it.
And as patriotic Americans, they are going to let us know so we can get back what is our combined mutual heritage of a priceless moment that, as you heard earlier tonight, Buzz Aldrin still remembers vividly every single moment of that undefinable experience, and we don't get to share it with him because we can't get our own tapes.
When we come back, we're going to talk with Richard C. Hoagland about some lunar artifacts. What does Richard really think might be on the moon? And also we'll talk about Mars as well. By the way, he's got a conference coming up at Joshua Tree in California. All the information is on the EnterpriseMission.com website, but if you don't have a computer, here's a toll-free number for you. That's 800-900-7030. That's 800-900-7030. And, of course, his critically acclaimed God, Man, and E.T. series, the DVD series, is available as well off the website or at 877-345-6222. Well, I just wanted you to know, Art just sent Lex an article from the Register in the United Kingdom about Stephen Greer, and you might want to take a look at it. It's up there on the coasttocoastam.com website. The Register, very complimentary to us at Coast to Coast, talking about how Greer was talking about this situation with Art, and then they also mention how we have broken the Dubai port story deal well before the national media. So very interesting indeed. But go take a look at it. Lex has it posted there as a huge story on the coasttocoastam.com website. Back in a moment with Richard C. Hoagland on Coast to Coast AM. First to the moon, then to Mars. Sounds like a movie, Richard C. Hoagland, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Lunar artifacts. You know, today I was recording the portion of my audiobook, Worker in the Light, and man, what a long, tedious job that is. I've got to do about 7 more hours of it tomorrow. I hope my voice holds up. But I was into the segment where we've written about Ingo Swann, his book Penetration, and some of the things that he remote viewed on the moon. I want your thoughts on lunar artifacts and what you think.
Well, if you scroll down on the Enterprise page, or you're looking in D.C. at TV 49, you will see under the last composite comparison from the scan-converted broadcast image versus the Polaroid of the raw images.
Okay.
You see that?
Yep.
There's this kind of vertical shot showing the moon at the bottom and this fuzzy stuff up above it.
Yep.
That is a Hasselblad Apollo shot taken on Apollo 10, which was the precursor mission to Apollo 11, which basically, was the forerunner, the kind of test of all the systems before they actually committed to the landing on Apollo 11. That was taken out the window, crossing the center of the moon, a region called Sinus Medi. Now, do you see that spindly kind of architectural-looking stuff like a skyscraper sticking up?
Sticking out of nowhere. It's just right in the middle.
That is in front of the lunar module windows, above the moon, kind of parallel to the height of their lunar orbit.
What is that?
It is, I believe, and we have close-ups. You know, if you click on the image, you go to a much bigger version you can then download into, like a Photoshop program and look at it in detail. That appears to be a glass ruin of something that was much more refined and much more polished and is now moth-eaten and full of holes from meteorite bombardment.
How tall is it?
It's miles tall. It's at least 10, 15 miles tall.
Does this picture show up anyplace else anymore?
Oh, yeah.
It does.
Well, we have a whole section on the Enterprise website based around the lunar conference I held at the National Press Club in 1996, where we have tons of these kinds of pictures.
So these haven't disappeared?
Oh, no. These have not. Well, because they kind of can't, because in 1996 we made a huge fuss at the National Press Club in front of the National Press. And so there's kind of a record, a paper trail of that these exist in the archive, and if they disappeared, everybody would kind of say, oh, my God, what's going on here?
Okay, that can't be some kind of anomaly on the camera.
Oh, no, because we have more than one set of pictures. I had a very limited time to put these up. For instance, the one, if you go to the picture below that, all right, you see the one where it says 1967 Lunar Orbiter 3?
Right.
That is a unmanned shot from the Lunar Orbiter series that was the precursor to Apollo. Unmanned spacecraft built by the Langley Research Center south of Washington there in Virginia, sent to the moon, 5 spacecraft loaded with film. They took pictures. They basically then scanned and developed the film in the spacecraft in orbit. It was a Kodak process called BIMAT, which is kind of like a super Polaroid. And then they would electronically scan those images and telemeter the light and dark readings back to Earth, where they were reconstructed by a scan system very similar to what was used on Apollo to reconstruct the images that were taken by a spacecraft non-electronically orbiting the moon. And that is only one of many, many pictures from Lunar Orbiter which show, I mean, you see that thing we call the shard sticking up?
Yes.
That's several miles tall. See the shadow?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's a solid. Now, that little cross above it is a resume mark.
That's not all right, that's not a doctored photo, right?
No, absolutely not. These are totally undoctored. People have been ordering these since I went on with Art in 1996, talking about them. There's a close-up of a thing behind the shard I call the tower, which is a several miles high glass tower with a cube on top, which is, solid stuff and has not been pummeled to pieces by meteorites. This stuff is really sticking up above the moon. And it's this kind of stuff, George, that I think we would have seen on the computerized, digitized versions of the Apollo 11 television, which is why the boxes have gone away.
You may be right. I mean, look at the shadow. It's the shadow that really is unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
But I've got to tell you, depending on the distance this photo was taken, assuming it was up close, I got to tell you, Richard, this thing looks like a small alien or a figurine or something, doesn't it?
Well, it always looked kind of like a bowling pin to me.
But it looks like it's got a head and little eyes.
Well, don't get too anthropomorphic here. These are structures. These are ruins. When you pummel ruins, I mean, just look at the awful pictures coming back from Lebanon of skyscrapers after they've been bombed.
Yeah.
And they can take all kinds of shapes. We're looking at stuff that's incredibly old, incredibly abandoned, but because of Brookings, remember that official government NASA report that I've been talking about with Art for years? If we ever found this stuff, NASA itself said it could not tell us because we couldn't handle the truth. It's in black and white in the so-called Brookings report, which is also available on the Enterprise mission website.
And when was that report done, by the way?
1959.
All right, 59. So we're talking about 47 years ago.
Yep.
Maybe 47 years ago we couldn't handle the truth, but we sure could now.
I totally agree. I think that what has become fossilized, archaic policy, kind of presided over by doddering fools who don't understand where the world is now in the 21st century and how desperately uplifting it would be for the human species to realize it's not alone, that we have neighbors, we had neighbors, they left us the very best in the way of information, perhaps science, perhaps in priceless engineering or physics. I mean, Greer talks about free energy. Can you imagine if we were able to actually land and walk into an ancient abandoned ruin inside the moon where there was equipment and laboratories and, power plant facilities and all the things required? Remember Buzz said it was very hard to live on the moon because there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Well, suppose you found that somebody had already licked the problem and all of that technology was yours for the asking to apply to all the problems we have here on this planet, in particular to get us out of the oil trap, which, of course, is what's going on in the Middle East.
How do we know that an ancient Earth civilization didn't have the kind of technology and they got to the moon?
We don't. It's absolutely one of the options. And we're not going to know until we get to the libraries and find out who signed the documents, in whatever form those documents are, recorded on crystals, the equivalent of DVDs or CDs or whatever. You mentioned at the bottom of the hour that we have a conference coming up.
Joshua Tree.
I have an extremely knowledgeable colleague, Steve Troy, who heard me talk about this with Art over 10 years ago, has spent a fortune of his own money buying and ordering negatives, analog negatives from the National Space Science Data Center, the Houston Spacecraft Center, all the archives that NASA maintains where they have redundant copies of these films. He has room after room in his house filled with books of original hard copy negatives, which he has then printed up in sectional enlargements and looked at with magnifying loops. And he has come to the independent conclusion, after 10 years of doing this, that we are 100% correct. The moon is studded with all kinds of ruins and artifacts and artificial things beaten to hell because of meteorite bombardment and because they're so incredibly ancient. And I've invited him to come to Joshua Tree and present stunning evidence in person to those who show up that we, in fact, are not alone, that there is this stuff on the moon. And you know, George, how people keep talking about the smoking gun?
Yes.
The one picture that will tip you over the edge? I have that picture. I've had it for several months. Steve doesn't even know I've got this picture.
I didn't even know you have this picture.
I'm going to show it for
You
the
never
first time.
hold things back from me.
Well, you and a few million of our friends, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to show it for the first time at Joshua Tree.
Boy, do you know how to tease. My
Hey, I learned from the master. Come on.
All right.
And, after people see this, there will be no doubt. I've shown this now kind of like in focus groups to a small handful of people. And these are people ranging from professional scientists to television producers to just curious people that we happen to know because we happen to know them, and to a person, man and woman. They are absolutely astonished with the smoking gun nature of this evidence.
And how would you compare this to what you found on the Cydonia picture in terms of just perception?
In terms of people being able to see it and know instantly what it is and go, oh, my God, it's real, it doesn't belong there, therefore the rest of this is real?
Yes.
I'd say it's probably, in terms of our current knowledge of Cydonia, it's probably a factor of 100 better.
Oh, my gosh.
There is no doubt. George, when you see this, when you come out on Sunday afternoon, on the 8th, you will get to see this, all right, with a whole bunch of other people so that you can all kind of share your reactions. And then on Sunday night, we're going to all talk about this. You are going to be absolutely blown away because there will be no doubt in your mind that, A, NASA has been sitting on the biggest story ever told, B, the astronauts are somehow victims in this. I firmly believe that as good patriots, they were all told at the time, because of Brookings, we can't tell anybody, but there will come a time we're preparing the public and we will tell them. And I think as they're quietly one by one dying, I mean, Buzz said there's 18 left now of the 24, right?
Yes.
We're not getting any younger, any of us. And all that has to happen is for the clock to run out, and there will be no first-person witnesses to corroborate when officialdom decides in their infinite wisdom it's time to tell the American people what's really there. So what we're trying to do through the efforts at Enterprise and through the help of our friends like the management at TV 49 tonight there in D.C., we're trying to open the door and get congressmen and legislators and the new administration of NASA, Dr. Griffin himself, to look at this, to look the American people in the eye and say, we really need to find this evidence that's gone missing.
That's fascinating. And how about shortly thereafter, then, we show that picture on Coast to Coast?
Absolutely.
On the links to you and everything
You got
else.
a deal.
Okay.
When you see it, it will cause so many implications to come to your mind. I mean, what I've tried to do is to put together a weekend.
How come this hasn't been hidden, by the way, this picture?
Because I think from the beginning there was a two-pronged strategy. In Washington, the worst thing that you can be accused of, and if it's proven, is not the crime. It's the cover-up.
Right.
Remember, Nixon didn't lose his presidency because of the break-in. He lost it because he lied and he tried to cover it up.
Yes.
So if NASA, which is full of very smart people, realized that Brookings was kind of running their life, what I think they did, I think they put things out there on the public record so they could never be accused of being 100% in favor of the lie.
And they just never comment on anything?
And they never comment.
They just
and we live in a culture, George, as you know, where if you don't call a press conference and are surrounded by 14 PhDs, nobody's going to pay attention except for the few. Now, if Brookings is accurate, if they're projecting that the American people will run amok, and by metonymy the rest of the world, you know that great line from Ghostbusters, cats and dogs living together, remember that, Bill's line? That we would all go nuts if we found out that this was true, then it probably was prudent to, in the beginning, try some kind of planned, I call it time-released aspirin, to acclimate the social consciousness and the social fabric to this wider reality. I had a call the other day from a major figure in a major television network, which has suddenly come to us and approached us about doing some work, some coverage of our work on Mars, that we'll get to probably in the next hour. As part of that discussion, I said to this producer, very high-level producer, I said, you know, I somehow get the feeling over the years that we are part of Brookings' recommended time-release disclosure. Because look at the way it's worked out, George. We have been able to find all kinds of extraordinary evidence. We have called press conferences. We've held them at the National Press Club. I've done too many shows on Coast. You know, I've lost count how many shows you and I and Art have done on these subjects. We have done conferences. We've published books. Suppose we're part of the acclimation program by default. In other words, they don't hide everything because they know that there will be a few of us assiduously looking, putting the science together, putting the data out there, and that a small percentage, a small but increasing percentage of the American people will slowly, one by one, turn to taking this more seriously. So someday, George, in their infinite wisdom, when they finally are forced to make the announcement, the culture has been prepared. And we have been part of the preparation, albeit an unwilling part, because, of course, I want this to come out tomorrow.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you a question, because some people have asked me to ask you this. Are you part of some kind of NASA plot?
No.
Now, I would say not, because I know you, but I have to ask you that.
Absolutely not. And what I laid out is the closest that I think we've ever come to being officially, shall we say, used as part of this running disclosure. Because you look at these pictures, I mean, look at the one that we have under the lunar orbiter shot, the one I call Mitchell under glass. This is a photograph that was taken by Alan Shepard of Ed Mitchell setting up the TV camera on Apollo 14, and he was wearing a gold visor. So all this blue stuff would have automatically been filtered out. You wouldn't have seen it. The way we found this is that I got access through Ken Johnston, who has been on Coast, a former NASA engineer, former test Apollo astronaut.
Wasn't he with us during the shuttle disaster?
Yes. Yeah. He was a spokesman because he actually worked on the shuttle program just before he retired from NASA. He has sequestered away a set of the original Apollo images, the hard copy images, from many of the missions. And the reason he did that is university somewhere in the Midwest, I think it was in Tulsa, if I remember now, Oklahoma, is because he'd been ordered by his boss at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory in Houston to destroy all the extra copies of the films. This was an official NASA order from his boss to take these out and back and burn them. Just get rid of them. Not even give them to a high school or a college, but to destroy them. So something in Ken revolted against that. So instead, he took the films that NASA had officially said we don't want anymore, and he gave them to his university. And when I met him years and years later in Seattle, where he worked for Boeing, when he came up to me at one of our lectures, and he said, I may have something that you might want to look at. And I went to his home, and I saw some of the pictures that he had preserved, and then I literally bought him an airplane ticket, put him on an airplane. This was right after the Murrah building had been blown up.
Yes.
And he flew into Tulsa to try to get the rest of the pictures from his university, and like the Apollo 11 tapes, they had gone missing.
We've got a story up as a feature article on coasttocoastam.com. I read it Friday. Lex has the story posted with pictures as well about basically someone who worked for NASA, and it was his job to collect these pictures that you're talking about now. Mm-hmm. And he had a contact at the Department of Defense at the Pentagon where he had to take these pictures, Richard, gave it to him, and then he never, ever heard from the guy again. And these were apparently very revealing pictures. You got a moment during the break, go to our website, coasttocoastam.com, Richard, and just take a look at the feature story. That'll be fascinating for you as well. I'm George Norrie, back in a moment with Richard C. Hoagland. I tell you what, we're going to talk about Mars, but we'll also open up the phone lines. It's already our final hour, how fast time goes by, so we'll give you an opportunity to chat with Mr. Hoagland as well. And our special guest tonight, Richard C. Hoagland. We're going to chat with Richard, and also we'll pepper this with your phone calls on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie with Richard C. Hoagland. We'll take your calls this hour as well with Richard. Richard, this is the 30th anniversary of the Viking mission, is it not?
It certainly is, George, and it doesn't seem like 30 years, I got to tell you.
That has been. I don't know, where does the time go?
It flies by. It absolutely flies by.
Now,
by the way, before we get off on the Mars, let me make one more point about the moon. And I do want to make a couple more points about some substantive things in terms of artifacts. If people want to see some of this stuff close up and personal, about 10 years ago, I gave a very elaborate presentation at Ohio State University, which we have put on DVD. And there are literally, both for the Joshua Tree Conference tonight and for the DVDs, operators, I always wanted to say this, operators literally standing by for your phone calls in case you want to order this specific DVD, it's part of the Moon Mars collection, which is offered at the 800 number 1-877-345-6222. There are folks there, good folks tonight, standing by because they knew I was going to be doing this. And you'll get to see all kinds of absolutely astonishing artifacts, things on the moon that do not belong, that are part of the rubble and the ruins that we believe we have found, and that we are going to be adding to when we do the Joshua Tree Conference, which, of course, is why those operators are standing by, because if you miss this before the next major push of public relations from NASA in terms of the Bush presidency vision, return to the moon, and then on to Mars, you're going to be missing out on a piece of history that we really do still retain, unlike the Apollo 11 tapes. So I would advise people, if they want to get this stuff and look at it in the privacy of their own home, run it again and again and again, show it to your friends, show it to your neighbors, show it to people who say, oh, you guys listen to Coast, you're nuts. Show them hard evidence, not rumors, not third-party, anecdotal material, but actual, official NASA archival photographic evidence of astonishing things right next door.
And this Joshua Tree event is almost like a mini vacation, isn't it?
Well, we're setting it in the desert. We're going to have pictograph explorations in the morning at dawn. We're going to be doing some group consciousness experiments, a la what you and Art have started, as part of the kind of HD conscious technology explorations of alternatives to the potential problems of 2012. We're going to go deeply into the whole 2012 saga, the Mayan calendar, what the countdown time is, what the physics, the experiments that I've been doing, that I found in the Soviet Union, that they've been doing, unbeknownst to the West, that are extraordinarily relevant to this whole 2012, what's really going on. We're going to explain, George, exactly what 1111 means. And if you're not there when we explain it, I'll explain it to you privately.
All right. Let's take a few calls, and we'll talk about Mars. They're lining up for you, Richard.
Okay.
I don't want to.
And so if people want to reserve, and I must say the reservations are going fast, so you got to get in while the getting is good. That 800 number is 1-800-900-7030 for the Joshua Tree Conference on Columbus Day weekend in October.
And if people miss the phone numbers, they're all on the EnterpriseMission.com website.
For those people who have the web, and if you're in D.C., the numbers are actually on TV 49.
Excellent. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with us on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Good morning.
Yes, sir.
I'm calling from Quebec City, Canada. My name is Kevin.
Okay, Kevin. Thank you.
Okay, you can put me on the skeptical list. Okay,
that's fine.
I know. I listen to your show a lot, and I know that we're entitled to our opinion, obviously. And I was just asking, maybe first of all, I have a little comment on extraterrestrial life before I ask you a question, Mr. Holden, if I may. If I'm not mistaken, before there was actual intelligent life here on Earth, there was millions and billions of years where there was water, oxygen, but no intelligent life, right?
According to the current models, yes.
Okay, that's all. Okay, now, concerning your question on civilization and markings that ruins on Mars, Mr. Holden, I have a question. Would it have been done by Earthlings?
We don't know.
Okay, we don't know. But what is your opinion on that? Because I think you're leaning on the Earthling, right?
Well, when I wrote Monuments of Mars, A City on the Edge of Forever, and it's now in its 5th edition, that shows you how popular and how many that apparently the publisher was able to get rid of. I've expanded the model in every edition. I have, basically I've leveled with people. I've told them when I thought a certain thing. I then told them in later editions when I thought things that were contradictory. My initial idea was that the things that we found on Mars had to have been done by somebody visiting from outside the solar system, because I believed the evolutionary, origin of humankind and going up the evolutionary ladder and just developing technology about 6,000 years ago and space flight about, 60 years ago, and et cetera. Now, given what I know about ancient history, given what I know about what we found on the moon, given what I know about extraordinary technology discovered by mainstream science, which has no place to be placed in that evolutionary timeline, I could easily be convinced that we're looking at stuff that was done by a previous high-tech civilization here on Earth, and we simply, because of planetary catastrophes or amnesia or some cultural thing that swept over the planet, we totally forgot what we used to be able to do, and we've been climbing back to the capability to go out and look at our own stuff. I could totally buy that because I'm not sold on any one model to explain it. The thing I am sold on is the evidence, the data is real. There are really ruins on the moon and on Mars, and somebody did it, and I'm waiting for the day when I can find out who did it.
You know, talk about synchronicity, Richard. This week we have Michael Cremo on the program.
Yes. Rob and I were just, commenting to each other that we're going to stay up tomorrow night because Michael's an old friend, and he has one heck of another perspective on the idea that ancient cultures on Earth may have been so much more incredibly sophisticated than we have ever been given credence. And we don't know that because we have somehow devolved from that high level of a former civilization. And Michael has extraordinarily interesting evidence to support that point of view.
Sure thing. Stay up tomorrow, but he's on Thursday, by the way.
Oh, it's Thursday.
That's all right. You don't miss any of the programs anyway.
Well, not every night. I'm not always working at this computer.
By the way, you do a great job as the science editor here for us because our advisors, the little tidbits you send us on a regular basis are very helpful.
People need to know that I am constantly peppering George with notes, 99.9% of which he ignores. But when he takes one, it's a gem.
It's a gem. That's right. He screens them out. When you first saw the face at Cydonia, and I'm looking, it's a. You got to tell me where you got this graphic that you've got for your Godman and E.T. series of the profile of the face on Mars.
Okay.
Where did that come from?
Is that the one that says Cydonia at the top?
Yes.
Okay, that's from Mark Carlotto. That is a three-dimensional computer reconstruction in Dr. Carlotto's computers, done in Boston by the Analytical Sciences Corporation, probably, 10, 12 years ago, maybe longer?
Great picture.
And it's a 3D perspective shot of what you would see if you were in an airplane flying into Cydonia now. All right? It's not the way it used to look. It's the way it would look now if you weren't looking down from orbit but were in a very high-altitude aircraft or a helicopter coming in for a landing. What's really astonishing is that profile up there of the face can be matched point for point with a clay model that was done by one of our artists in the Enterprise mission in the early years, back in the 80s. Her name is Kinthea. She is going to be bringing a whole bunch of her paintings to Joshua Tree and exhibiting for people who would like to get up close and personal with the more artistic side of this investigation. And when you compare the two models of the face, the 3D models, remember, NASA's claim all these years was, it's just a trick of light and shadow, meaning it wasn't 3D, it wasn't a statue, right?
Right.
When you compare Kinthea's clay model with Mark Carlotto's digital 3D model, the two turned out to be exactly the same. Two totally independent people, separated by 4 years, separated by an entire continent. They didn't even know each other, and they came out with the exact same statue of a 3D face, a humanoid face, lying on Mars, looking up at the stars, where it has no business being unless it has something profound to tell us.
Gosh, I wish we had some answers. Well,
with MRO, if we all get together in this audience, and in the next few weeks I'm going to bore the tears out of you by telling you how you can do it, we may actually be able to politically reach out and change history and finally get the truth, George, because that camera in MRO, which is attached to a 20-inch telescope looking down from less than 180 miles up, is going to be able to read the proverbial license plates at Cydonia, to see the girders I've talked about in these constructions, the massive ruins in such decay and dilapidation because of their incredible age. And if we can force the politics in Washington to be honest, if we can get Mike Griffin to simply make a pledge like he did with Hansen a few weeks ago, that no good science would be covered up by PR and media spin, we will get the truth this fall on a question which has lingered for over 25 years. In fact, 30 years from this summer on July 20th.
Well, and let's hope we don't get a hatchet job like they did on the Global Surveyor. Remember
That's
that one?
Where all this audience has to basically mind its P's and Q's and be on their mettle and pay attention, and we will keep them honest that way.
First-time caller line, you're on the air with Richard C. Hoagland on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hi there, George. How you doing?
Good, thanks.
This is Tom from Hutchinson, Kansas.
All right, Tom.
The reason I called is because Richard was talking about they had missing film and stuff from the
Apollo 11. Yep.
Yeah. I had a place for him to start his search.
Okay.
All right.
Here in Hutchinson, Kansas, we have a space museum called the Cosmosphere.
Yes.
It's where the Apollo 13 capsule is, and
know it well.
Liberty Bell 7 and all that. Anyway, they have a warehouse here. Actually, they have two of them. And I'm a fireman here in Hutchinson, and I've done building inspections on this warehouse.
Oh.
And when we go through it, there's always someone has to follow along with us to, show us around the building. And we'd always ask questions because it's just filled with tons and tons of different artifacts from all the space missions and things like that. And one time we're going through, and they have shelves of boxes of what are film reels. And I asked the guy one time, I said, what are these? And he goes, well, just about every film ever taken during the Mercury missions and the Apollo missions are in these boxes. And
now what we're looking for is not film.
But you're looking for 1-inch videotape, right?
1-inch magnetic videotape, which was the old Ampex standard. We used to run them at CBS.
Yep.
All the networks had them.
Used to be 2-inch, then it went to 1-inch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're in big boxes, and you can't kind of, conceal them. You can't shrink them down. So somewhere there are 698 boxes of these, and they're probably all together. And that's a very good lead. And I don't know whether the NASA people looking around, have thought of the Cosmosphere, which has done a very good job of saving and preserving and finding. I mean, they have found spacecraft, George, in junkyards that NASA had just sold for scrap.
Amazing.
And they found them and reconstructed them and refurbished them, and like the Smithsonian does with the Wright Flyer and Lindbergh's plane and all that. Except these is a private group in Kansas, near Kansas City, I believe, that's done this for years and years and years. It would be astonishing if these tapes were to somehow have gotten into people like those archives, and we could find some kind of a lead there.
Well, what could these films be, though, Richard?
Well, the films, NASA made umpteen films over the years. They would put out a PR film on every mission within like a week of the mission coming back. And when I was the National Press Club, one of the things I did is I ran one of these original films from Apollo 12. And then I showed the assembled reporters how when you take the individual frames and put them through a computer and you enhance the background, you see all this structure, these girders, in what should be a pitch-black lunar sky. I mean, go back to the web and go to that very top picture that's signed by Buzz, right?
Yes.
You see the LEM there over on the left?
Yeah.
You see Buzz's shadow, pitch-black lunar sky, stark gray landscape. His signature, of course, is not in the real sky on the moon, okay?
Yes.
Then you scan down on the page to the blue Mitchell under glass picture. That is a similar picture taken on Apollo 14 by Alan Shepard that was squirreled away by Ken Johnson for 30 years out of NASA's clutches. And when you put it under computer and you simply, enhance the contrast, that's what's in the sky. That's all I've done with this picture is to turn up the gain. That's what I think we would have seen on the Apollo 11 scans, which are magnetically pristine and are now missing, so we can't put them through a computer process.
Have you done any work on Apollo 13?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
In
fact, Steve is going to be showing some most amazing things that were photographed by the Apollo 13 crew, Jim Lovell and his crew on Apollo 13. Remember, they didn't think they'd ever get home, and yet they took pictures.
Right.
And in the movie, there's that great scene where he says, if you want to get home, I think we've got to stop taking the pictures. Well, on those pictures, which I went looking for because I thought maybe the sensors had missed some things, lo and behold, we found some astonishing things, and Steve found the most incredible artifact on the far side of the moon, which, when you see it, you are going to absolutely, not believe your eyes, but it's verifiable. We've got frame numbers. There's more than one picture of it. There are two pictures taken at two different angles, a few minutes apart. And, Apollo 13 was a really intriguing mission for all the things that it shouldn't have been able to do that it did, not the least of which is to survive. NASA was able to bring those people home when probably they should not have survived.
No, it was an incredible story.
Absolutely. It was NASA at its best. This hiding of data, this thinking that we're not adult enough to handle what's really out there, is NASA at its worst.
I thought you were a Mike Griffin fan.
I am. Remember, none of this was done on Mike Griffin's watch.
That's
He's
true.
the new guy.
That's true.
He has total, perfect, plausible deniability. If Mike means what he says, and I think he does, within the strictures dictated by the White House, remember, he doesn't serve by his own.
Right.
He serves with the pleasure of the president. So the buck ultimately stops in the Oval Office, right? If there is, as I believe, a movement, an inching toward disclosure, as part of the Brookings prescription that we read in that document, Mike Griffin could now step up to the plate, and as the new guy who is going to the Congress and asking for lots of money to go back, he could keep faith with the American people on what we already got, and they haven't had the nerve or the guts to tell us.
Let's go to our wild card line. You're up on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hi, George. This is Blair in Sedona,
Hey,
Arizona.
Blair. Sure.
Good
Hi,
evening,
Richard.
Blair.
Hey, Richard, you mentioned Brookings. I'd like to submit possible evidence of, Section 102, Subset B of the NASA 1958 Charter was invoked as Buzz Aldrin was exploring. And I have a phonograph record from 1970 entitled We Came in Peace for All Mankind. And off the moon exploration segment on side 2, I put on compact disc a 23-second excerpt where Colonel Aldrin and Houston are having an exchange. Now, if this is an accurate sequential account, in other words, not edited by the producers of this record for effect, except for the speed of light transmission delays that were routinely edited out on this LP, 7 minutes of lunar exploration time were taken away from Colonel Aldrin because he voiced a certain lunar anomaly to his eye. Could I play that for you, George?
How long has it run?
It's 23 seconds.
Go for it right now.
You got it.
Buzz, this is Houston. You've got about 10 minutes left now prior to commencing your EVA termination activities.
I hope you're watching how hard I have to hit this into the ground. It almost looks wet.
Buzz, this is Houston. You have approximately 3 minutes until you must commence your EVA termination activities. Over.
Roger, understand.
I love it. Okay, hey, Blair, thank you. We'll be back with Richard C. Hoagland. We'll take final calls and wrap things up in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Well, listening to that 23-second audio clip of Buzz Aldrin, really the only thing that I heard that was of really interest was he just said it kind of looked wet. But that was about it. Hey, if you're interested in some gifts and things like that, you can go to the coasttocoastam.com website and look for the gift shops. There's a link right there at the bottom of the homepage. Hats, T-shirts, and some great little novelties just for you. Is Robin going to be at the Joshua Tree, Richard?
Absolutely.
Well, in that case, I may show up then.
And she will welcome you with open arms.
Yes, just make sure that your speeches are very long this time so
Okay.
Robin and I can dance the night away.
Okay. Actually, we're going to have outside fires. We're going to have Native American dancers. There's going to be a full moon. It's a full moon weekend. We're going to have telescopes so you can actually see the moon and some other things in the sky and have someone around that knows what they're looking at to kind of describe it to you. I mean, we're going to have one heck of a good time.
Excellent.
And people will learn a lot. They'll meet new people. They'll become a community. And it's only the first of many of these things I'm going to do because we've got to change. We basically have to change the trend curve, which is to keep us in ignorance and in blissful ignorance. And ignorance is not bliss.
And you're going to have me carried into the event with rose petals tossed at me as I come in. Is that true?
I was thinking of actually wild stallions, but, if you want rose petals, we can.
Yeah,
we
wild
can
stallion. You'd probably have me tied to them and you'd pull me apart or something. Back to the phones we go. East of the Rockies, you're on Coast to Coast with us. Hi there.
How you doing, gentlemen?
Good, sir. Thank you.
Pretty good.
Richard, I have listened to you so often, and one thing I've always taken from every time I've heard you is the fact that, gosh, you always inspire thought more so than anything else. And years of my life, 9 years of it was spent in Wapakoneta, Ohio. And one of the things that
this is Neil Armstrong's hometown.
Oh, you better believe it. And the formation of SETI was actually heralded in that small town of, maybe 10,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And the disbanding of it was a real blow to the heart. But then in the 80s, when it was reformed, again, it was heralded. The fact that, the quest to find out what's going on will live on. The only thing that wasn't answered, and perhaps you can lend a little bit of insight on your thoughts to it, is what happened in the meantime? What happened as far as, maybe influence of what SETI stood for and where the true influences of the people behind it. How did the people behind it change? Because as we know, Carl Sagan kind of changed his mind about certain things, and
I'm not sure the SETI people have changed, Richard.
Well, no, what he's talking about is that NASA launched SETI like 25 years ago with big fanfare.
Well, and then they're out of it now. It's a privately...
And then Senator Proxmire, a senior senator from Wisconsin, best known for cheese, on the floor of the Senate railed against the absurdity of wasting money, NASA money, federal dollars, on searching for little green men. And because congressmen are not noted for their,
vision
courage, they all turned around and voted the SETI experiment, which was a tiny slice of money, a few $1 million in a budget of billions.
Yes.
They voted it out of the budget, so it fell to people like Seth Shostak and others to find private sources, people like Paul Allen,
sure,
and others. So they created Project Phoenix, which was, of course, named after the fabled Egyptian bird that is reborn from the ashes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only been in the last couple of 2 budget cycles that I believe SETI is now creeping back in to the official NASA budget process, and there is some funding of SETI-like activities through NASA once again, but it's like, an entire generation later.
Can SETI win? Because, we've got people who have heard Greer on this program and with Art, and they hear him talk about the unnamed sources that claim that they've heard signals. Can SETI win? Because, we've talked to Seth Shostak, and I'm going to get him on the program because I want everybody to hear his voice. Mm-hmm. But, he says, no, we haven't heard anything. Can they win, Richard? Because people don't believe them. Some people.
Can they win politically?
Yeah.
They're between a rock and a hard place, because when you have a documented list of official lies, just go to the Enterprise website or turn on TV 49 in D.C. tonight, and you'll see pictures of ruins left by somebody in the solar system that wasn't George and it wasn't me.
No, but you can't blame SETI for this.
No, I'm saying against that backdrop, if they persist in claiming that they never hear anything, it does make it a little curious, because it's like, where did everybody go? If there was somebody here and they built stuff and left it all over the place and they're no longer around, did they become extinct? Did they die off? Was it the human race collapsing back to one planet? Were they aliens or were they not aliens? In other words, SETI will ultimately, when it has enough computer power and enough antennas and has sifted through enough stars, it will have to answer publicly the question, where is everybody?
Well, assuming we're going to pick up radio waves.
Well, that's the big assumption, and that's where I really find fault with Stephen's discussions last night with Art, because frankly I don't think that radio is going to be the preferred medium for interstellar communication, let alone just right next door.
No, maybe the show, but I'm not sure about the communication part of it.
We're going to be showing at Joshua Tree some extraordinary physics, the hyperdimensional model, which I now can confirm is backed up by decades of hidden Soviet science experiments that have been declassified. And I'm going to present some of those, like I did in Los Angeles and San Francisco earlier this year, to the Joshua Tree, community that we're assembling. And you will see that if any aliens are out there and they want to talk to other aliens across the galaxy, they're not going to be using radio because it takes too long. So I am extraordinarily suspect of Greer's information at 2 levels. One is could they keep it secret? Because I think Seth is probably right SETI is so full of holes that if they ever really heard anything, somebody would leak it. There would be some story running around on the internet. And number two, if they didn't hear anything, does that mean there's nobody out there? No, it simply means the technology is not using EM radio waves. It's using something much better that now our physics can comprehend.
I really believe if they heard something, they would need it just for more funding. They'd let the world know about it.
Well, even if they were sat on, if they were politically squashed, there's so many ways to get a disc out now and put it on the internet that something would have leaked that was more substantive than stories with unnamed people. I'm always suspicious of stories with unnamed people unless there's companion evidence. And our sources come with evidence.
What kind of evidence, aside from the fact that he won't reveal who these people are, what kind of evidence could these same people leak so that we would look at it and say this is real stuff? I mean, or could that be
the direction in the sky where the signal came from, the frequency range it was heard on?
They could make all that up. All that could be made up.
But if you then turn real antennas and look and don't hear anything, then you have a test. See, this is what Shostak says. He says that the first thing they would do if they heard a signal is they'd call up, Judd Rollbank, they'd call up, Arecibo, they'd call up the German antennas, they'd call up the folks in the Far East,
and get everybody,
get independent groups listening and looking in the same part of the sky.
Right.
If this was a bona fide leak, if somebody on the inside is so fed up with the lies going on that they wanted through Greer to leak that there's something really going on, why didn't they leak the full story, which is how someone like me could get an antenna and point it at the sky and listen independently?
True.
That's your test.
Wild card
photographs, we've got corroborating documented data. I got to tell you a very interesting story, George. This smoking gun image that I'm going to show,
yes,
which has more than one artifact in it, by the way. It's taken close up and personal by astronauts on the surface of the moon of things that are much smaller than my desk. All right?
All right.
They're on the order of, maybe a third of the side of my desk. I sent via email this one image to a very well-known astronaut, a household name, which I cannot reveal. What he sent back in email was the most remarkable communication I've had in the last probably year.
So you're doing the same thing Greer is.
Let me finish, please. All right? Let me tell you exactly what happened.
All right.
I don't have his permission. I do have the pictures. The difference is I've got pictures. Just go to the web and look at them.
Well, I know you have the pictures.
So I sent this to this astronaut, and he shot back an email which was not, Hoagland, you're nuts. Hoagland, never darken my door again. Hoagland, you are an utter idiot. Instead, he said, when you have found higher resolution versions, send them to me again.
And then you will bring him on the program.
I will bring him on the program. Now, since this is a guy who's in the know, what this little communication, which is full of plausible deniability, tells me is, A, it wasn't a surprise, all right? There was no shock. There was no, oh, my God, that's unbelievable. You're nuts. It was get better data, which tells me and tells my friend Steve Troy that somewhere in NASA there is better data, and all we have to do is go find it. That's the way this game, and it's really a game, is being played.
Wildcard Line, you're up with Richard C. Hoagland. Hi there.
Hi, good morning from Hollywood, Florida. My name is Mark.
Hey, Mark.
I'm listening to you guys on the wonderful Island of Dreams, 610 WIOD. I had two shuttle questions for Richard here, if time allows. The first one was regarding an interview that Art Bell had back in January of 2005 with the inventors of the HARP project, Guy Kramer and Dr. Joseph Resnick. They were discussing some of the capacities of HARP, and one of them was being able to basically destroy or break apart an ICBM on reentry as it transited through the ionosphere. And I was wondering if Richard has heard anything of HARP being active at the time Columbia was reentering, and whether it was either more than likely an inadvertent activation of it.
I've seen websites that detail that evidence that make that claim. I don't think the evidence is compelling. I think that there were a series of incredible, sad, tragic, accidents that compounded to create the Columbia disaster. I'm watching NASA now, and all the stuff they're doing that I said on the show, George, a few weeks ago? Mm-hmm. Why didn't they do then what they're doing now? Like look at the tiles and take pictures and, try to make that foam stay on, and all those things that is not really a huge amount of money in the long span of the 25-year shuttle program, and it's because they got so complacent. They got so comfortable with this thing coming back looking like, run over by, an 18-wheeler, that when they got one back where they really had followed every single thing on this mission 121, they couldn't believe the pristine nature of the tiles even after landing on the runway at Kennedy and rolling out and stopping. And that means that every flight before, they were rolling the dice of Russian roulette till something did them in, and it did them in twice. And I think it is just an incredible, tragic accident. And it shows you what happens to an agency when it doesn't listen to people outside, when it thinks it knows everything, when, we're NASA and you're not, as Chevy Chase used to say, paraphrasing. And that's what killed, all those wonderful, brave men and women. And hopefully it will never happen again, because we're not going to let this agency become complacent ever again.
And actually, to segue into my second question regarding 121, I did notice that on the footage that was being broadcast that day after it landed, that there was a browning on the white tiles just aft of the cockpit and the entry hatch.
Yes, I've seen that on all the shuttle reentries. I saw it live with my own eyes when the fourth shuttle came back, and I was at the Edwards where President Reagan was to kind of officially hand the reins over to NASA from a test program to an official active operational program. That streaking on that white, on those white tiles and that white thermal blankets is basically the carbon from the RCC, the carbon on carbon at the leading edges of the wings that boils off, and it literally condenses as a black residue of soot, of graphite, on the orbiter as it's re-entering.
That's very normal then, right?
Yep, totally normal.
Okay, thanks for the call. First-time caller line, you're up on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hi, George. This is Joe from Cheney, Washington.
Hey,
hi,
Joe.
Richard.
Sure thing.
Hi there.
Yeah, hi, Richard. I wanna bring some things forward to you. I worked for the federal and state government, and I'm retired now. George, I've corresponded with you for many, many years. I'm the Rarotonga traveler.
Okay.
And I have two direct relatives, one a brother, one a brother-in-law, one a retired fighter pilot that flew here in the Pacific Northwest, another one who currently works for the State Department. We've been talking about it. He's high in the State Department, and I want to stay in touch with you, too, because we're talking about bringing this stuff forward of their knowledge. And
that'd be excellent.
That's basically my call is, other than I think you're doing a great job, Richard, keep up the work. It's like God said, He created everything in the universe, and, it doesn't really make any difference with what people think on religious values. It's let's get the truth out. The government has a way of attitude towards it's a need to know, and they don't think we need to know anything. And one other thing I'm going to say is I live out in eastern Washington, and I'm a very credible person. I'm retired law enforcement, and my son and I witnessed a craft over our property, and it actually made my son go join the Air Force to study. He's studying now to be a pilot because he's on a journey and wants answers. So
okay, well, you keep in touch with us.
I will keep in touch with you, and keep up the good job, both of you.
Great. Richard, I only got a couple minutes left. Why don't you tell us again about the conferences and the work you've been doing?
If people want to see close up and personal these artifacts, there's two ways to do it. We have the DVD of Ohio State. You call 1-877-345-6222. Some very nice people are standing by all night now to take your calls so you can get to see this stuff in your own home and run it for your friends and neighbors and send copies to Mike Griffin and say, what about this? When are you going to tell us the truth? The other opportunity to see this is when Steve Troy and I present this astonishing lunar evidence, including what I call the smoking gun evidence, at the Joshua Tree Retreat for 4 days on the Columbus Day weekend this coming October. And their operators, nice folks, standing by there tonight at 1-800-900-7030. And if you have web access, you can get all these numbers on the web. If you don't and you're in D.C., you can get them from Channel 49, TV 49. And I certainly thank you, George, for making it possible to initiate this political campaign and try to find out what happened to our priceless Apollo heritage after 37 years.
Well, Richard, like you, I just want answers. Whether Stephen Greer has the great sources or not, or you, I just want the answers. That's our job here.
We all want answers. The question is, how do we get them? And I don't think without this audience, without this incredible Coast audience, we have a ghost of a chance, pun intended. But with this audience, we've done it before. I think if enough people email Mike Griffin tomorrow morning when those TV cameras show up and say, Mike, where are our tapes? He will have a very thoughtful perspective on what he has to do to go and find our data.
Let's just hope he doesn't say, what tapes?
Well, we'll take it to the next level if that happens.
Then we have a real problem. Richard, take care, keep in touch, and look forward to seeing this picture you're going to unveil at Joshua Tree.
You are going to absolutely, you'll have an exquisite time.
Can I get a little preview of it before the event?
Maybe.
All right.
If you ask just right.
I just have. See you later.
Okay, good night.
That's Richard C. Hoagland. Well, that's wrapping it up for tonight. We've got a great week of shows for you here on Coast to Coast AM. For Steve Carr, Dan Galante, Tom Dan Heiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladesseur, Ross Mitchell, Ian Punnett, and Art Bell. I'm George Norrie. Somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe.